Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7 by 7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So over the past couple of episodes, we've dived deeply into editing and project management and book creation conversations with Tom Hoeler, the senior editor at what used to be called Del Rey is now Random House Worlds. Basically, it is the portion of Penguin Random House that is publishing all the Star Wars books that you know and love. Today, we're going a little bit sideways on that conversation and talking about Tom's particular set of skills, one of which is that he's able to edit books. Well, I'll let him tell you about that. But basically, we're going to have that conversation around the idea of the playlists that he creates for each of the books that he edits. And we're also going to talk about code names, the code names that they use inside Random House Worlds for the various projects that they're working on. Tom's going to tell us a bit about his process in coming up with them, and he's going to tell us the story behind the code word used for Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah Dawson, the book that's coming out next month. This whole conversation with Tom was really fun and really insightful and amazing. I enjoyed the heck out of it. I hope you've been enjoying it as well, and I hope you enjoy this final part of it too. For my part now, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be. And without further ado, here's the final part of my conversation with Tom Hoeler, senior editor with Random House Worlds.
Well, one thing I think you do for switching things up for yourself has to do with the editorial playlists that you create related to the different books. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because I think it's a really fun thing. And I'm also curious about it from a process perspective because, for example, when I edit, I cannot have anything in, like, it either has to be instrumental or in another language. Like I'll listen to Bossa Nova when I'm editing, so it's in Portuguese. And it's just, I don't grab on to English lyrics while I'm trying to concentrate on somebody else's language. I want to know how you arrive at the playlists that you create while you're editing. Is it something that you are just inspired by the particular mood or tone that a book sets that gets you starting to think about certain songs? Or are you actually listening to some of this music as you're going through the editing process? How do you do it, and how do you build the playlists that you build for the books?
Yeah, so one of my skills, this is like one of my weird skills, is that I can read and listen to music with lyrics in the same language at the same time and not have them weirdly cross over and like, oops, I just missed half a page because I was listening to the hook of that song, or vice versa.
Right.
I can do that. I don't really know why. It's one of my skills. And so this goes back to, I work from home now, and work from home pretty much permanently. I don't go into an office anymore. And most of the work that I do as an editor actually lends itself to working alone as it is, because when I'm sitting to actually edit, I'm not necessarily sitting in a room full of people having a conversation. I'm reading a book. So when I was in the office and I would be trying to get reading done in the office, it's not uncommon for folks in any office environment to like put a little music on or something when you're trying to focus on a task. And so that's what I would do when I was reading in the office. I was trying to like read part of a manuscript and didn't want to be disturbed by, conversation going on around the office or whatever. And I would start to, what I would find is just music, the different music I was listening to. I mostly have my music on just like kind of shuffle. It might be based by genre or something, but like I'm not necessarily loading up like 10 songs that I definitely want to listen to. I just sort of let it run, the algorithm run based on what I usually listen to. Mm-hmm. And when I started to find what was happening is I'd be reading a book and a song would come up that would just like kind of click with me as being related to the book. And sometimes it would be a line in the lyrics. Sometimes it would be like the title of the song. Sometimes it'd be something like really esoteric and strange, just the way that the singer said a particular word or an echo of a word in the book that I was reading in the song. And I would just like very kind of strange things. And for whatever reason, my head would start to click. I was like, oh, well, this song matches this part of this book, or this song really reminds me of this character. So I would just start to throw them onto a playlist. And I do this as I am going through the early stages of a book. Oftentimes not the very first time I'm reading a manuscript. That I'll usually just read without anything because I just want to get the base down as far as like, all right, where's the story going? How are we landing? Where are we going? Where are my initial pain points that I'm seeing? But particularly because we talked about, I read every book a bunch of times. I think on average, by the time a book goes from first draft until it's final and off to the printer, I'd say I probably read every book 5 to 7 times, maybe more. If it's a book that has to go through a lot of heavy editing, goes through a lot of revision, I might read it more than that. But I would say about 5 to 7 times. And so particularly in those middle times, and I might have my thoughts together as far as like what I think we need to revise or what needs to be looked at, it's not quite working. Once I have those and I'm starting to key those into the manuscript, or I'm starting to just read more and like get my head around them a bit more, that's when I'll start to be listening to the music, and I'll start to just throw a song, I'll hear a song that like something about it just clicks with me with this particular story, and I'll throw it into a playlist. And I'll throw more songs into the playlist as I hear them. And then eventually I'll just start listening to that playlist, and I'll start reorganizing the songs based on like, well, this song is really more about the beginning of the book, so it just needs to go at the top of the playlist. This song is really about the end of the book. It goes into the end. I kind of organize the playlist roughly in chronological order. Stuff will drop off the playlist. And I'm like, this song kind of made sense, but now I've heard it like 5 times and I've read this book 3 times. It doesn't really, whatever inside joke I developed for myself didn't work. So like, it goes away. And I'll add things and subtract things. And then, at the end of this, I'd have this kind of playlist. And I just decided that this would be a fun way that I could let people a little bit into my process of putting the book together, and a little bit of like the experience of building the book, by being like, these are the songs that I listened to as I was editing the book. So like when you're reading, and I don't necessarily explain them, but it's like when you're reading that cool battle scene, I was listening to this song like over and over and over, because like the pace of it, the kind of energy of it really matched to me what we needed the pace and the energy of the battle scene to be. Or it'll just be a utterly ridiculous inside joke that probably only me will ever get and only me will think is funny, and that's totally fine too. So that is where the playlists kind of came from. And over time, I just decided it was like a fun thing to put out before the book was out, because I don't explain them, because it's a fun way to sort of drop some Easter eggs, but I'm not really dropping any spoilers or anything, because there's no way you could listen to a playlist and totally understand anything that's going to happen in the book, because again, most of it is these weird inside jokes. But it also is a fun way then for people to listen to the playlist and then kind of tell me what they think the songs mean, and be like, well, I think it means this and this. And a lot of times they come up with amazing connections, amazingly valid reads that I'm like, that's not what I thought at all. I just picked that song because there's one line in the lyrics that I thought was super funny. And it just like sometimes that surface. And yet people like create these really amazing explanations or their own connections to it. And so I just thought it was kind of a fun thing to do, and a way to also, for me now, I can go back and listen to like the playlist from Thrawn Ascendancy Lesser Evil. And it is a way in listening to that playlist for me to kind of relive the experience of editing that book and working on that book, and remembering like, oh, right. And this is when we decided we were going to add this thing in, which I added this song because late in the edits, we decided we need another scene with Thrawn and Thras. And I thought about this thing, and this song connected with it. And so it's almost a way of creating this kind of memory of working on each book, as well as this fun artifact of mood and emotion. Just like a cool extra bit of fun that I get to have while I'm doing my job, and also picking out music that I think helps me edit better, because it helps me focus on a particular thing, particularly because, no matter how much you like something, and I think food is a good example of this, like if you really love some food, if you ate a ton of it, like a lot of days in a row, eventually you'd come to get sick of it. You'd be like, can I please eat anything else but this, right?
Right.
And no matter how much I'm enjoying a book, and no matter how much I'm appreciating the work an author is doing and their rigor and everything, if you're reading the same book a lot of times in a really short window of time, there is this little bit of monotony that can creep into it, no matter what. It's impossible to avoid, right? And so having the music is a way for me to combat that potential monotony. It's the way to hold it at bay, and thus keep myself from drifting away from the book, from being like, oh, well, I've read this chapter 4 times. I don't need to focus on it anymore. I'll just focus on the next chapter because a big thing happens in the next chapter. And having the music is a way for me to combat that, so that I stay as focused on that chapter the first time I read it, the 4th time I read it, the 7th time I read it, to make sure that it's, the best version of itself.
I like that a lot. And the thing that you mentioned about Lesser Evil makes me wonder whether, as you were preparing for Lesser Evil, did you revisit the playlists for Chaos Rising and Greater Good? I think it's Chaos Rising. Shucks. Now I'm not
You nailed it. You got it.
positive. Okay, good. All right. Did you revisit those playlists prior to getting into the editorial process for Lesser Evil to kind of ground you in what those two books had been like prior to going into the third?
I did, because I also was revisiting those books themselves. I was rereading the books just to remind myself about not just little plot things that happen, but character arcs, and sort of not just where did we leave the characters at the end of Greater Good, but sort of what journey have they gone through here. And I did revisit those playlists again to help get into that mood, to sort of get back to remind myself different things, but also because I was like, I don't want to repeat music. It's not that I can't. In fact, there is, I believe, at least one song that repeats in the Thrawn, in those three Thrawn one. There is at least one song that was reprised very intentionally.
Right.
But in general, it's like, I don't want to repeat these, especially if I'm using them not just for me, but if I'm also releasing them to people. I don't want to give people the same 10 songs that The Night We Met by Lord Huron was a song that I used on Thrawn Ascendancy on Chaos Rising's playlist, and I repeated it for Lesser Evil for kind of a very specific reason. That maybe if you read both books and listen to both playlists, maybe somebody will figure out. But in general, I don't want to entirely repeat the music, because I want people who are coming to these to feel like they're getting new music. And because each book, even books within the same series, are just different. And they have a different vibe. So I do sort of look and I'd be like, oh, if I use that Third Eye Blind song 4 times, all right. Because, I'm a creature of habit at times, and, I'll be listening to a particular genre a bunch. And so I will listen to the same music from time to time quite a bit, but I try not to let that infuse the playlist.
Gotcha. And would you indulge our audiences by considering one very ridiculous inside joke that you think only you would have been amused by? And are you able to share what an example of that might be?
This isn't really an inside joke, but I pretty much knew from the first page of Lesser Evil that the last song in the playlist was going to be Exile, featuring Taylor Swift, featuring Bon Iver, mostly because I was just like, I don't really think that Thrawn would be a big Taylor Swift guy. But also I'm like, I know that, the book ends with Exile.
Yep.
Spoilers, I suppose. But so the only song that makes sense is Exile, there. A lot of times it will be because there's one line of a lyric in the song, and it's not even the most important line in the song. It's not part of the chorus. It's not part of the hook. It'll be some random throwaway line that I think refers to a side character. And I'll just be like, haha, this refers to this side character who only appears in 5 pages of this book, putting it on the playlist. And so there's a bunch of them like that. So on the Chaos Rising playlist, which is book 1 of the Ascendancy trilogy, there's a Barbra Streisand song on there called "The Way We Were," which, for folks who may not be familiar, is a very well-known song from. It was the soundtrack song to a huge movie from back in the day that Barbra Streisand was in. I believe she was in it with was she in the movie with Robert Redford? I might be making that up. Somebody will fact check me. It's
him or Chris Christopherson, one of the two.
I don't think it's from. I don't think it's from.
No, it's not from. What we're thinking of, A Star Is Born.
Yeah, it's not from A Star Is Born. It is. The Way We Were is the name of the movie. It's from the 70s, and anyway, Robert Redford's in it. And it's called The Way We Were, and it's this song about longing, and it's this song about history and relationship. And I put that on the playlist because there is a scene in Thrawn Ascendancy where we get this sort of flashback, not quite the very first meeting between Thrawn and Admiral Ilani, but one of their, let's say, early most important interactions, which happens to be an outing to a art gallery, and then an outing combined with an outing to a martial arts dojo to have a fight, because I always thought it would be funny if they like sparred together. And I put it on there because I was like thinking about that song, and it came on I think it was playing a playlist with like movie soundtrack songs, and it came on my thing, and I was like, this really doesn't refer to anything. Like this song about longing, and it's like there's not really longing between Thrawn and Hoeler, but the song about people with like a deep history and really intricately connected. And I was like, it's also kind of funny if I connect this song to this scene, because the scene of them going to an art gallery and Arlani just being like incredulous, just being like, you took me to an art gallery to tell me about the art. And Thrawn being like, yeah, where else would we go? And that just the way in which these two people are connected, but also at times kind of talking past each other, just connected to this like grandiose song. And I was just like, this is perfect, but it doesn't really make any sense if you think about it too hard. Again, these things are just filled with them, because it's just, it is a way, again, to keep the stories fresh for me. It's a way to keep the stories vibrant and avoid, again, that monotony, which has a real effect on the work. It's not just for fun. It's not just a lark. It can have a real effect on the work if suddenly I'm like, whatever, I know what happens to this chapter. I don't have to read it 3 more times. Like, no, you do, because edits have been made, and you made edits in the chapters around it that maybe now cascade into that one that you have to notice. And so it really does, as much fun as these playlists are, they really do serve a purpose of trying to keep me fresh and focused, from edit 1 all the way through edit 5, 6, 7, whatever it is.
It's a really unique way of doing it. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it is. Like I said, I've never really met another book editor who can listen to lyric music while they're editing to this degree. I'm sure there are others, and I would love to meet more editors that could do that, because then I have more fun things to talk about with them. Fun fact about editors: like, editors don't actually spend a lot of time talking with other editors. It's just one of those things that, unless they're an editor like on your team, like I have a team of people that I work with that I talk to all the time. But other than that, like, I actually don't know that many book editors, just because editors don't really get together and chat a whole lot. I'm not really sure why, but we don't. So.
And what might they even talk about? You put me in mind of a short story by Leonard Michaels I read many years ago, where he, as the character in the short story, was familiar with a friend who was also a writer. So writers, not editors, but his own attitude was that he wouldn't want to ask him about the progress of his book because he just felt like that was too invasive. And eventually it got to a point where his friend got really upset with him because, like, you never asked how my work is going. And so just the two different approaches to how they were doing their writing, ended up being a source of friction between the two of them. But I wonder how it is with editors, if editors ever meeting each other actually really want to talk about the work, or if they'd rather, if some would rather not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think we would. I mean, first of all, editors would love to just sit around and like talk about books, because that's what we talk about. But, sit around and talk about authors, authors we all worked with, because a lot of editors might have worked with common authors, because authors, move between publishing houses, or, their YA book is published by one team with one editor, and their adult novel or their Star Wars books published by other people, and just talk about, like, editors love getting book recs or getting book recommendations or author recommendations. So, like, who better to give you an author or book recommendation than another editor?
That's fair.
I'd want to sit around with editors just to talk about, like, the really crunchy stuff of editing. Just be like, how do you edit? Because again, I don't talk to other editors, I don't really know, like, is the way that I edit correct? Is it right? I think it is, because I think it generally results in good work, but because it is a pretty solitary thing, and you don't get to see other editors doing it, you kind of have to go and ask somebody. And I would love to surround other editors and learn cool tricks on how to be a better editor.
Yeah, it's not exactly a spectator sport.
No, I have definitely seen, like, once or twice someone has tried, like, oh, I'm going to be an editor and, like, do Twitch or whatever. And I'm just like, it's just a lot of watching a person stare at a computer screen and not say anything for like an hour. Yes. I don't mean that in a bad way. I actually think it's cool that someone is trying to figure out a way to, like, let people into the editorial process. And I've thought about that too. But it's not really a thing. You can't sit next to me and watch me edit, because again, you're just going to watch me stare at a screen for a while and not really say anything and then take a break. Like, that'll be the whole experience. It'll be pretty boring, really.
And then there's only so much you could say anyway when you're dealing with stuff that's generally so secretive to begin with.
Yeah, and also generally, I think, and I feel this way. I think most editors and I think most authors probably feel this way, is that sort of relationship and the process of editing is like kind of this, a bit of a sacred space of like, that's a place for the author and the editor to engage with each other, to chat, to like work through making something that might not be good, make it better, and then make it really great. And so most of the conversations that I have with authors, like, it's just like, it's between you and me. You and I are just going to talk about this, going to work through this, and like these notes and these things are not getting shared with other people. Not because people are saying like weird or salacious or like offensive things. It's just like
right.
that you need to create that you need to have that sort of trust in order to build a really good working relationship, particularly on a creative endeavor. And so, yeah, it is a little bit sacrosanct. And that's even before we start talking about like, ooh, we're talking about this video game plot, or we're referencing this TV show thing that's not out yet. Even before you get into like the bells and whistles sort of things, you need to be able to have that trust between an editor and the author. And if one of you is running off to, download your notes to social media about the chat you just had 5 minutes later, like that trust is never going to be built.
Right.
So, yeah, that makes it a little bit challenging.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of secret things too, there is one other thing I wanted to ask you about that's also, I think, very fun that happens, which is the code names that you guys have for books in development. And anything that you would like to share about like why you decided to have code names for things, and also if you are able to share code names for books that have come out recently, maybe in 2022, and even if you are interested or able to hint at code names for books that are upcoming, that would be very fun.
Yeah. So, okay. So the reason, so there's a practical, so the practical reason is that, you work on a book as far enough ahead as you can, but you may not yet really be able to talk about what that book is about, what that book is related to, maybe some of the specifics of it. We'll use a really great example of like, working on the novel Battle Scars, which is related to big video game that's coming out. It's related to Jedi Survivor, which, well, it's out now. But, at the time that you start working on it, that video game's not out yet. Most of the details about that video game don't exist yet. But you're working on this book, and kind of bring us all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. Working on developing a book is, again, not just editing and revising, it's all that project management. And the book still has to start to make its way through a publisher. You need to start to be able to have conversations with people about like, when are we scheduling this book for? When's this book going to come out? When might we have materials? What are some of the details of this book? And so you need to start to have conversations, even if all of the bits of the book are not necessarily ready for any kind of public consumption. So one of the things that we do is, rather than just calling the book, what it is, give it a code name so that you can start to have conversations about it, but we're still ensuring the confidentiality that we might need at various stages of the process, so that there isn't a situation where accidentally somebody third hand writes down the name of a book or something and releases it, and suddenly, even in an unintended or accidental way, you have released material that is not yet ready for broader public consumption, right? And using a code name is a pretty simple way to avoid that. And yeah, someone might find the code name, but if they don't know what the code name means, then it's doing its job, right?
Right.
And so I took this to the nth degree, which is like, well, if we have to have code names,
here we go.
Cool. They should be actual code names. Like, yeah, it could just be like Untitled Book A, and then the next one's Untitled Book B. Like, yeah, we could do that, but that's not fun. I mean,
No.
This should be fun, he says. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who thinks this is fun. So I will oftentimes come up with like absolutely ridiculous code names for books, which we will then use. And then eventually, once the book is formally announced or gets its formal title or whatever, those code names go by the wayside. But those code names might often be around for like months and months and months. So I could tell you that the Inquisitor novel, Delilah Dawson's Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade, which comes out in July. If you're listening to this, it's May 2023 right now. But in July, in 2 months, we've got this book coming out. And the code name for that book for the longest time was Treadle, Treadle. And the reason is always been obviously a big Monty Python fan, and there is a very fabled sketch from Monty Python about the Spanish Inquisition. So the moment that I'm like, oh, we're doing an Inquisitor novel, like I can't help but think of the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition sketch. And the very first line in the sketch, or one of the very first exchanges, is the guy comes in and says, one of the crossbeams has gone out of skew on treadle. And he says it very quickly and whatever, and he has to repeat it a few times. And so I was rewatching the sketch, and I was just like trying to find a word that I thought might be a fun code word. And I was just like, oh, treadle. So that became the code word because it relates to the sketch, Spanish Inquisition, the book's about the Inquisitors who don't have any actual relation to the Spanish Inquisition other than the word. So that was the code name for the Inquisitor novel for quite a while.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's see. For the Cantobite novel, which came out just before The Last Jedi. So Cantobite being the, glamorous, rich city where all sorts of things are going on, and also happens to be the place in The Last Jedi where, Finn and Rose find the hacker or the splicer that they need, right?
Right.
And so knowing that when we were working on the book, and knowing that, I decided that the code name for the book was going to be Zero Cool. And the reason for that is that the 90s movie Hackers, which stars Angelina Jolie, among other people, the hacker name of the main character, played by Johnny Lee Miller, is Zero Cool. That's his hacker username. That's his sobriquet, is Zero Cool. So I named the Cantobite novel Zero Cool because it connected to the idea of a hacker. And in the movie, they will go and find a hacker. And so it was like this 9-step process. And again, these code names are all like infinitely more complicated than they need to be. Almost no one ever asks me what the code names mean. Every once in a while, someone will, and I will get to be all excited and explain the process. And I imagine people are usually rolling their eyes at me when I do that, but I get very excited to do it. So almost all, they're all crazy like that. As far as future code names, I can't really tell you a future code name, except I can tell you a future code name that is not going to be used because we don't need to use it.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you what the code name means, though.
Okay.
So, it was announced at Star Wars Celebration, the novels that are coming in the next phase 3 of the High Republic.
Right.
And it was announced the titles of all the various books that are coming, both the books that will be coming this fall when, kind of really kicks off, and then even books that are coming in the future, even, several ways down the line. So, for instance, we announced that Charles Soule is going to be writing a novel called Trials of the Jedi. And so Trials of the Jedi does not come out for quite a while. And
that's spring 25, I think, right?
I believe so. So that novel had a code name that we don't need to use anymore because the actual title of the book has been revealed. And so I will tell you that the code name for that book was going to be Korma. But I'm not going to tell you why.
Would you spell that, please?
Corma.
Oh, as it sounded, as Korma. I wasn't sure if you were saying that or Korma with a QU for a second.
CRMA. And people I'm sure will Google that and look it up, and it does connect to various things. But I don't think anyone's going to be able to figure out exactly why that is the code name for the book. I don't even know if after you read the book, you'll be able to figure out why that's the code name for the book. It's a really, really, really esoteric one. But
I guess I'll have to put a note in my calendar to follow up with you in 2 years on that one.
Exactly. Yeah. Ask me again. Set an Alexa reminder or whatever, and ask me again in a couple of years, and I will explain it. So that was going to be that one, but I don't need to use that code word anymore, which is nice. And I'm sure all the people on my team who are always like, what is this, the code word? What does this code word mean? Like, we'll be talking about a code word or something in a meeting, and we'll say, and then like after the meeting, someone will send me a message on on our Teams or Slack or something, be like, what does that code word mean again? And I'll explain it again. because you got to keep all the code words, got to keep all the subterfuge, you got to keep it all straight, right? And so that's the only way to keep all the information secure. But again, much like the playlist, it's just trying to keep a part of the job, which can be either frustrating or a little mundane. To be like, oh, we got to use code names, can't use the real name. We got to keep all the information protected for all very good reasons. It's a way to just make it a little more entertaining. It's also, I consider I think I'm pretty good at it. So it's like one of my again, much like listening to lyric music while editing is this is one of my very few superpowers. It's I can come up with a really good code name. Plus, as people know, it's all the Star Wars stuff has code names. All the movies have code names, everything's got a code name. So it's just, of course, the books have to have code names too.
Of course.
Can't be left out of the fun.
Then this whole conversation has been fun, and I'm so grateful for all the time that you've taken out of your day to share all of these wonderful insights and stories with me and with our audience. I think just the last thing I would ask you is, for people who want to follow you more directly on your continuing Star Wars journey, where should they keep up with you? Where should they keep up with Random House Worlds?
Sure. So if you want to follow along with all the stuff that me and my team does, you can follow us on all the social channels, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. It's Star Wars Books on Facebook, but the other two are Del Rey Star Wars. And I feel wait a minute, why is he telling me to follow Del Rey Star Wars even though he works for Random House Worlds? That's because it's the same team. We've sort of just rebranded. We haven't gotten around to rebranding the social channels. So Del Rey, DELREY Star Wars. And you can follow along all the announcements and cool stuff we've got coming. As for me, really the only place that I exist or hang out is on Twitter. You can find me at Darth Internus. Internus is spelled INTERNOUS. And so, if you want to hang out, anyone has questions, ever want to ask me weird questions about my playlists or anything like that, hit me up. Always happy to chat. And that's where you can find me.
Wonderful. And I will link to all of that in the show notes for this episode as well. Tom Hoeler, thank you again so much for taking the time and all of your brilliant expertise and for keeping things fresh for yourself so that way we as readers can enjoy the absolute best that these authors are able to give. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Alan. Thanks for having me. Always happy to chat and appreciate it. Looking forward to the next time.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the force be with them. All original content is copyrighted by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.